To make our Shimmering Shamrock jewelry set, we're starting with white Makin's clay. The 120 gram package comes with an outer box, and then inside the clay is double wrapped to keep it fresh. There is an outer plastic wrap, which you would just cut and remove, and then the clay block inside is also wrapped in a plastic wrap to keep it fresh. Now you can either remove all of that or just cut off with a scissor the amount that you are going to use for your project, which is what I've actually done for this. I'm using about a half of a package of 120 grams, so about 60 grams of clay. Once you cut that package, you're going to want to keep your clay, any clay that you're not using, in a Ziploc bag with a damp paper towel, and that will keep it fresh for use at any time because it is a no-bake, completely air-dry product. So the next step is to add the foil to our white Makin's clay. Now you do not need additional adhesive to do this. When the clay is fresh, this foil will stick to it. These are these great Clearsnap designer foils, and they come in all sorts of beautiful colors and multi-pack sheets. There's several sheets in each of these packages. I'm using this beautiful emerald green and some gold for this project. So I have my fresh clay, and I'm just going to place that foil on top and press. I can lift and see if it's transferring, and yes, it is doing exactly what I wanted. Once I had the green foil over the surface of the clay, I wanted to go back and add some gold. Now you could do this with any contrasting color. You could mix up colors. And I'm just pressing it into those areas where the green foil did not adhere to transfer it. It's just a touch of that gold over the green. Now at this point it's beautiful just the way it is, and I could just gently roll it smooth and cut my pendant and use it this way, but I wanted a very subtle effect for the shimmer of the foil, and I'm going to show you next how I achieved that subtle crackling. Now at this point you could hand roll this to a much thinner thickness in order to make it start to crackle, or the simplest thing is to use the Ultimate Clay Machine, and I'm rolling it on the first setting, and it's about 1/8 of an inch. This machine has non-stick rollers, so it works perfectly with all types of clay. Now that I've rolled it with the Ultimate Clay Machine, I have this very subtle crackling of the foil. If you hold it in a certain light, it looks like a background, but it's not really obvious. But when it hits the light and changes, you can see that iridescence. The next step is to stamp our shamrocks. And to do that, I'm using a permanent green ink. Now this ink happens to have a little bit of an iridescence, which I think is pretty with the metallic foil too. I'm just going to ink up my stamp and choose the section where I'm going to want my main shamrocks to be, and I'm going to say like right there, and just stamp into that fresh clay. And this will leave the stamped image, but it'll also leave an indentation of the shamrocks, which is really pretty. And then I'm using the Makin's clay cutters. This is the circle set. There's actually 3 pieces. They're in graduated sizes. This is the largest and the smallest. I'm going to use the largest and cut around my shamrocks. And then I want to make some earrings, and I want one side of those to have shamrocks too, so I'm going to cut 2 small circles with a touch of the shamrock. Now, in order to make our beads, which is what we're essentially making here, double-sided, I'm also cutting from a non-stamped area. And this also makes your pendant kind of reversible if you don't want to have it for St. Patrick's Day time of year. I'm going to cut another unstamped circle from the largest cutter and 2 more from the small. And I went ahead and cut extra circles from other clay areas too that I'm going to use for a project later on. To make our little stamped and foiled discs into double-sided beads, I'm using some gold tone head pins. And I just placed it, I found the top of my shamrocks, which is like right there. Placed my first pin there, and then I placed the second disc over that and made sort of a sandwich with that head pin. Now fresh clay will stick to fresh clay without any additional adhesive. If you do need to add some adhesive, you can either actually just moisten it with a little water, and that will help if your clay is still fresh, or you can use a clear drying glue like a tacky glue. I like Beacon's tacky glue. Beacon's 3-in-1 is great too. And I'm just making that sandwich with that head pin inside. Actually, it's an eye pin, it's not a head pin. And I know there's a tail here that we're going to cut off, but we're not going to do that until after our bead is fully dry in 24 hours. So I made one large, and then I did the same thing for my earrings, a plain on the back and a shamrock on the front with those eye pins. And then I actually decided to make an extra bead for my pendant to hang above my shamrocks. So I took 2 of those blank discs that I had cut with just the foiling and did the same thing and embedded the eye pin in those. So I would set all of this aside to dry for 24 hours, depending upon your atmospheric conditions. Now that our clay is dried for 24 hours and is fully cured, it's time to go ahead and remove the end of those eye pins to make our beads. And to do that, I just used a pair of jewelry pliers with a cutter and cut them off even with the clay. The next step is that I wanted to hide that seam that we created when we attached the 2 pieces of clay together to make the beads. And in order to do that, I'm using my metallic foil again and Beacon tacky glue. Because our clay is dry, we do need an adhesive to have our foil attached to it. I just put a little of the tacky glue onto a scrap and rubbed it over the outside edge of the bead. Put a good, fairly thick coat. Kind of an even application. It won't be perfectly even, but that's okay. We're just kind of trying to disguise that seam a little bit with a touch of foil without it being a solid foil edge. And once I had gone all the way around my bead, and I did the same thing on my smaller beads, took the metallic foil and I started at the top where the eye pin is, and then I just rolled it around the bead completely. So that it's attached where that glue is still wet. To hold it in place while that tacky glue dries, I just used a clothespin that I attached to that little eye pin, and that holds the foil around the edge of your bead while your glue is setting. I let it set maybe 15 minutes, and then I just went ahead and pulled off that foil. And again, you have this great slightly touch of foil that hides that seam and sort of disguises it a little bit, yet still has a bit of an uneven effect like the crackle on our background. The next step is to add this beautiful gloss to our finished beads. And to do that, I'm using ice resin. Ice resin is a 2-part resin, and it comes in these handy dispenser tubes. This cap just pops off, and then you use the plunger, and it dispenses an equal amount of both elements of the resin. And then you stir it for a minute, and you're ready to go. And it dries crystal clear, and it really is beautiful. It's a little bit of a dimensional gloss. So I've already put a small amount of the resin in and mixed it for the 1 minute. And then I'm just going to pour it over the surface of our bead. You can use a little stick if you want to extend it. So once you've spread your resin to the edges, it will self-level as it cures. I set it aside to dry, and I let it dry about 12 hours until it was set. And I repeated, I did the same thing on my earrings. And then once this surface was fully cured, I went ahead and I flipped it, and I did the back of the pendant and the earrings. And I also took my stick that I used to dispense it, and this one's still wet, so it's a little trickier, but I did put a little bit of that resin also around the outside edges of my bead, just to set that foil and continue that gloss all the way around. So once that resin is completely cured, and you can see that great gloss that it truly does give your finished pieces, I added my jewelry findings, some gold chain, these great square Connie crystal beads for a little more sparkle, and these tiny gold beads, which are also from Connie crystal. I'm really pleased with how this finished pendant came out. I did make the matching earrings with the same square crystals and gold beads, and I think it would be a great accent to an outfit any time of year, not just for St. Patrick's Day, but maybe it'll bring you a little luck when you wear it, no matter what day it might be. I hope you enjoyed this project, and stay tuned for the next episode of Creatively Crafty with Cindi McGee for more creative ideas.